So in this tutorial we're going to run through the Simple Solid Round primer, and this primer is a single sheet PDF that you can download from Shoespace. It's in the Learning Materials subfolder, and there's a few things to note about these primers. The first one is that they're not a detailed tutorial. They tend to just give you the outline steps that you need to go through in order to complete the primer. So they tend to be intended to be a little bit of additional resource that you can use either while you're in the teaching sessions or maybe after the teaching session. So with that in mind, we're going to run through this one and just add in the extra detail that you don't get on the PDF. And the first thing that we can see from this is we're going to have to create an extruded feature here. So there's a base shape here that I'm just tracing round with my pointer, and obviously we'll have to sketch that on one of the planes and then create this initial extrude. And then when we've created that base feature as an extrude, we're actually going to sketch on the front face of that feature. So you don't just have to place sketches on the datum planes, you can pick flat faces from the actual model itself, and you can use those to sketch on as well. So then we're going to sketch this sort of shape, and then we're going to create this extra extrude, which will come towards us as we're looking at the part now, and out of this front surface of the part. So when we've created those two extrudes, we can actually move on to add in round features to them, because that's what this tutorial is about. So the extrude portion itself isn't technically part of using the round feature, but you do need some geometry in your part already, some solid geometry, in order to attach the rounds to. You can't have access to the round tool until you've actually created some geometry in your part. So that's what the extrude portion's allowing you to do, to get access to the round tool. So we'll get rid of the primer just for the time being. You need to load up Creo, and then maybe shut down the browser window that loads up automatically, and then you can go to create new part up here. And it's probably best if you give this a descriptive name and then save it, just so that you have a copy of it to come back to if we need to at any point. So descriptive name, Simple Rounds, so it ties in with the primer sheet. And you can see there that I put an underscore between the two words. Creo won't actually tolerate spaces in words. So that goes for file names, and it also goes for feature names. If you start naming your features in the model tree, it won't allow you to put spaces in those names, so it will throw an error if you try to do that. So you can see I'm in my part environment now. If your planes aren't visible, you can check whether the visibility is switched on or off in this drop down here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just select this front plane. So if I want to check which plane I've got selected, I can just hover over it and I get that little pop-up just telling me which plane I've got selected. So I'm going to select that and then click on the sketch tool. And your view may or may not rotate round to view that sketch plane at 90 degrees. If not, you can use this little icon at the top to force it to view the plane at 90 degrees. So I'm just going to quickly sketch out the shape shown in the primer. So you can see I'm panning my view around by holding shift and holding the middle button of the mouse, and that's just to give me a little bit more room off to the right of the coordinate system here, because this is where I'm going to draw my part in this quarter of the screen here. So I'm just going to get the solid line tool, and whilst I've got the PDF visible, I'm just going to quickly sketch out the shape of it. So I have another screen here that I can view the PDF on. If you're struggling, you can always minimize or rather size down the Creo window so that you can open the PDF on the same monitor as well. So when you've finished your shape and you've gone back to the start point, if you just hit escape to come out of that line tool, and then if you hit escape one more time, it cancels the tool altogether, and you're shown the automatic dimensions that the system's applied to that shape. So if I wanted to enter some more logical dimensions, these just happen to be where you've dropped the points when you've freehand drawn the sketch. Then you can enter specific values in all these boxes. But for our purposes, the dimensions that the system has put on are fine. If you need to drag any of these points around, you can at this point. You can pick any of the points and just drag them into position. But those dimensions are fine for our purposes. This is just an exercise just to get used to the round tool. So we'll OK that, and you can see that when I OK it, I come out of the Sketcher dialog, but the sketch is still selected in the model tree here, and that's why it's got this blue highlight around it. So with that still selected, I can click on the extrude and I get a little preview of what the extrude's going to do. Again, the depth isn't that critical. If I wanted to round that up to, say, a nice round number, I could enter the value there, but for our purposes that's fine. So I'm just going to OK the extrude there. And again, we could do a mid-plane extrude, but for the purposes of this, having the extrude going in a single direction from the sketch plane is fine. So the sketch plane is back there. If you click on the sketch that's now hidden, you can make it visible again, and then when you click away it disappears. So as I said, we're going to position the next sketch on this front surface of this part. So if I want to select the sketch tool and then hover over the front surface, you can see it being highlighted, and then just click on there and OK the sketch. So click on the sketch button and you're in sketch mode again. Again, if your view doesn't rotate round so that you're viewing that face at 90 degrees, you can use this button here, the sketch view button, and as you can see it rotates the view round and we're viewing the front face at 90 degrees now. So the way I'm going to create this shape, I'll just show you a couple of ways to go about this. So obviously the shape is broadly that sort of shape, but it has a thickness to it, so you could draw in the thickness here, and you can see that there's some constraints that the system's trying to put in to do with making this diagonal line that I'm about to draw parallel with the diagonal line that I've already drawn, and I could accept that and just press escape and make an extrude from that. There is a slightly quicker way that you can go about this, or maybe not quicker but easier to control, because the problem is with this way, if I wanted this a constant thickness, I'd have to type a value in here, and then I'd have to dimension from this line and this to this line and put the same value in. So that might be quite time consuming and laborious if I want to make changes to this. So let's just quit out of this sketch and lose all those modifications that we've just made, and then we'll recreate an alternative sketch. So I'm picking the sketch tool again, picking the front face, clicking on sketch, rotating the view, so I'm viewing the face at 90 degrees, and then all I have to do is pick the line tool again and just create two lines this time, and then hit escape. So this is going to be what we're going to use to control our extrude this time. We're just going to use two lines. We don't need to sketch the thickness in there. So if we OK that, so you can see we've still got that sketch selected now, and then if we click on the extrude tool, you can see what the system tries to give us is an extrude, but if you were to view it end on, which I'm about to do now, so I'm going to view it directly from the front of my shape, you can see that it has no thickness at all. It doesn't matter how much you zoom in here, you will not see any thickness to that extrude. It has zero thickness. So in that respect, you could never manufacture that piece of your part. It's purely there just to help you construct some solid geometry that maybe you could manufacture. And what this is known as is a surface. So whereas this first extrude was a solid, because if you were to cross section that, you would see it has solid material all the way through it to its core. This is another class of feature which is known as a surface, and essentially surfaces are there in the CAD modeler to help you construct your solid geometry. They are not things that you could ever manufacture because their thickness is 0, so they can purely exist inside the CAD system. But in this particular instance we don't want a surface, so what we're going to do is we're going to change some of the options up here on the Extrude tab to allow us to give this extrude a thickness. And how we're going to do that is, by default, as I say, the Extrude has taken that line and said, I assume you want to make a surface from this, not a solid piece of geometry. We're now going to override that and turn it back into a solid. So that's that first icon there. You can see that by default the system's selected the second icon. We're going to click on the first icon, and what that allows us to do is apply a thickness to that line. So apply a thickness to the surface. So it's we're halfway there. We've selected that we want to use this line as a solid, but what we also have to do is we have to give it a thickness. So if we click on this thicken sketch button towards the end of the row of buttons here, and by default it gives us a thickness that it's suggesting, but we can enter any thickness that we want, and you can see there what it's doing is it's using the sketch shown in green here as a starting point, but then it's offsetting and essentially creating a second sketch which is a copy of the first but with this offset value here. So I can put a bigger offset value in if I want, and the thing just gets thicker and thicker. But we're controlling that just with 2 lines in the sketch. If I wanted to thicken it in the opposite direction to the other side of the sketch, I could just click this change direction arrow that we get in lots of dialogues. So here's one for the direction of the extrude. Now it's gone inside the part, and this one's for the direction of the thickness. So you can see that's a midline thicken. That's in the upwards direction, and that's back to where we started again. So just have a play around with that, just understand what's happening there. Right, so we'll OK that extrude, and you can see now that we've applied the thicken command to it, we've actually got some solid geometry there. So technically we could manufacture that in the real world, so that's actually a useful part geometry now. So we've essentially created the extrude that we're going to hang our round features on, and I think what we'll tackle first is this full round on the top here, and the primer is giving us this piece of advice: select these edges, and it's labeling these 2 top edges here. So let's try that now. So what we do is we select the round tool up here, and as with all the feature tools, it's trying to get our attention and draw our attention to this tab, this sets tab. So what I like to do is open that up just to see what it's trying to request. It's highlighting set 1, and it's highlighting references. So it's basically asking us for some geometry to populate this box that's sort of highlighted in this sort of pink colour. So make sure that you've got that box selected, and then hover over the first line that we're going to select, and then this is an important step: hold down Control and then select the second edge, and you can see that those 2 edges now are in that box, so it's got those as input. So if we just zoom in a little bit, it's giving us a default radius of curvature for these 2 rounds, and you can see that there's a round on this side, and it's put a exactly same size round on the other side. So that's we're partially there, but what this doesn't do is these 2 rounds don't meet in the center, which is what we want. If we bring the PDF back again, you can see that what's been created using this full round tool is it's essentially deleted that top surface, and it's allowed this surface that we can't quite see here, this diagonal surface, to run seamlessly into this vertical surface here. And to do that, it's deleted that top face and it's replaced it with an arc shape round, so a round which is based on a portion of a circle or a portion of a cylinder here. So what we could do is we could maybe measure that that original edge there, and we could make each of our rounds half the size of it so that they meet in the center there. But that's quite a difficult thing to achieve by just entering values into this box. It's quite difficult to get them to meet perfectly in the center without leaving a little flat section. But you don't have to worry about what radius of curvature you would have to type to make that happen. There's just a full round button up here, and you give that task to the system. So what it does is essentially what I've just said. It measures the distance across there, and it makes the radius of curvature of each one of these rounds half the distance, so they meet perfectly in the center. So you're no longer in control of what radius of curvature that is. It just applies a suitable radius to bridge from this face to this face there. So that's the full round tool. So we'll OK that. So we've done the first one. So let's look at some of the others. We've got the variable edge chain, select this edge. So it's a single edge that we're going to select this time. But you can see the round that we're going to create has a very large radius of curvature at one end of the edge and has a very tight radius of curvature at the other end of the edge. So it changes its shape and its radius of curvature as it runs along that edge. So let's try that one this time. So it's the round tool again that we need to select. I'm just rotating the model and just moving it into position so I can easily select the edge that I want. Now I'm going to select the round tool. Again, we could open this tab and just check that the correct edges are going into this entry box. You don't have to. You can trust that everything's working fine and just select that edge. Just click on it once, and again you can see that we're getting the preview of the default round. So the default round is just an arc, so a portion of a circle used to create some solid geometry to bridge between the two faces that intersect at the edge that you've picked. So we could drag this to any size that we want. We could enter a value there, but what we want to do is we want to start off at a small value for the radius and end at quite a large value. So the way that you access that is the edge that you've selected, you hover over it and you long right click, so not left click, right click, and when you long right click you get this extra menu here, and one of the options in this menu is make variable. So we select that, and now what we can do is we can enter two independent values for either end of this round. So if I want to make this end much bigger, I can maybe double the radius curvature at that end, and you can see that it's almost like the surface of a cone. So it starts off at a tight radius curvature, maybe shrink this one down even more, and there, that's very similar to the one that's shown on the primer PDF. So that's the variable round. So we'll OK that. So we've done the variable. Let's bring the primer back again. One of the other ones is putting rounds on all these edges here. So you can see that this second extrude feature that we created with the thicken feature, it's got rounds that run all the way round its edge that it shares with the first extrude feature. And what's being written about this is constant edge chain, intent chain, select this edge, intent chain highlighted. So that's not immediately clear what we're supposed to do, but essentially what it's asking us to do is to select all these edges that this extrude shares with the front surface of this, but there's a trick that means we don't have to just go around clicking on each edge. We can select one of them and tell the system that we'd like all the others around there selecting automatically. So we're going to do that now. So again, we'll select the round tool. We do need to open the tab, the sets tab here. So we'll open the sets tab, and rather than just clicking one of the edges now and getting started and adding all the edges in here, what we're going to do is open a sub menu or a sub window that's part of the references window, and we're going to click this details option to get into that. So you can see here it opens this other window up, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a rule that we're going to specify to tell the system to select all the edges around here. And if you look at these edges, so we start here, we maybe go to this one, we then go to this one under here, and then we go to this one. I'll just get rid of that. I clicked on that by accident, so I'll remove that. And then back to where we started from via this edge and this edge. They form a continuous loop, so they loop back round to where you started. So the option that we want to select from these three here is complete loop. Now all we have to do is select one of these edges round this loop, and the system will select all the rest. So we select one, we get a little preview, we click on OK, and you can see it's automatically selected them all round there. They're highlighted in green, and it's giving us a preview of what the round feature is going to do. So again, if we wanted to change the radius of curvature of this, we could use the drag handles to do it just visually, or we could double click on this value and enter a value in there. So it's a quick way of selecting multiple edges without you, the user, having to hold down Control and click on each edge individually, which in this example isn't saving a huge amount of time, but if you had a very, very big perimeter to select that maybe had up to 50 or 100 sub edges in there, it would be a very good way to save a lot of time. So we'll OK that. So that's that one, how to select loops of edges. And then I think we've just got one final one, which if we look on the PDF again, we've got this constant edge chain, which is a pretty easy one to achieve, but there's a few details to note in there that it's worth being aware of. So we'll do that. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to put a round on this edge and this edge and this edge here. So let's do that now. Let's click on round. Again, we could get the sets tab open just so that we can check that we're selecting the right things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the first edge. I'm going to hold Control down. I'm going to select the second and third while still holding Control, and then if I let go of Control, then we've created the feature that it's asked us to. So that's quite easy, but the critical bit there is holding down Control. Let's just vary the size of these, and you can see as I type in values either into the box in the graphics window or the box up here, all the edges that I've selected all either grow or shrink at the same time. So I'm controlling them with a single value, and they're all varying just using that single value that I'm entering. So I can select as many edges as I want. But the critical thing there, if I quit out of that feature now, is it's very easy to make the mistake when you're selecting these edges of not holding down Control. So let's do it that way just to see what the difference is. So if I click on the first edge, I'm not holding Control. Click on the second edge and click on the third edge. So all these edges now have a radius of curvature of 20, but watch what happens when I edit this value. So let's reduce it down to 10. You can see that only this final edge that I selected is now being affected, and that's because I didn't hold down Control. So when you hold down Control, it puts all the edges that you're selecting in a single set here, whereas you can see because I didn't hold Control, it's created three separate sets: set 1, set 2 and set 3, and they all have an individual value that you can enter for their radius of curvature. So we'll click on set 1, that's 20 mil radius. We'll click on set 2, that's also 20 mil. So that's this one and this one, I think. And then we'll click on set 3, which is the one that I've just changed, and that's 10 mil. So you no longer have the ability to control all of the edges using a single value. So if that's what you want in your model, if you need to be able to vary the edges independently of each other, then that's the way to do it. Don't hold down Control, and you'll create multiple sets in here that you can control individually. But if you want to have the ability to control them all using a single value, then you must hold down Control when you're selecting the edges. So let's just play around with this a bit. Let's turn them all so they're completely different radiuses. So I've just changed set 2. So set 1 is now 20, set 2 is now 30, set 3 is now 10. So yeah, subtle difference there. As it happens, what's been requested of us in the primer PDF is that we set them all using a single value. So let's try that again. So all using a single value, you select the first one, then you hold down Control, then you keep Control held as you select all the subsequent edges. And now when I change this value, I'm affecting all the edges. So that's just an important note. So I think that essentially is the end of the primer. We've covered all the things on there. So that's the end of the tutorial.